In show business, the ultimate achievement is earning an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony over the course of one's career. The idea is that to be considered truly great, one must be universally excellent in one's field. And in Hollywood, that extends beyond just being good at one thing. A truly legendary talent is great across the board. In terms of sports, it works a little bit differently. But everybody grew up with that one kid who was literally the best in school at every sport possible. He was the quarterback, point guard, and pitcher and dominated in all three sports. Truth be told, there are probably quite a few professional athletes who grew up like that, before having to decide on one sport or another as their go-to game. Welcome back to Triple Double, and in today's video, we'll be going over NBA players who played multiple sports. So drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's get right into it. Tim Duncan, his sport was swimming. Long before arguably the greatest power forward of all time decided he wanted to play basketball, he dreamed of becoming an Olympic swimmer. As a teenager, he swam pretty impressively in the 50, 100, and 400 meter freestyle events, and had realistic aspirations of appearing in the 1992 Olympics to represent the Virgin Islands. However, when Hurricane Hugo destroyed the island's lone pool, he turned to basketball, and the rest is, as they say, history. Hakeem Olajuwon, he played soccer. Growing up in Nigeria, Hakeem Olajuwon was a top goalkeeping prospect and actually never even picked up a basketball until he was 15 years old. It's been said that his skills as a goalie translated directly to his skills as a top defender and shot blocker. In any event, the dream was very good at one sport before even considering taking up the one that would earn him millions of dollars and 2 championship rings. John Lucas, he played tennis. John Lucas was an All-American tennis player while at the University of Maryland, and he competed in a handful of Grand Prix tennis tournaments in the 70s. He played well enough to eventually find himself ranked as high as 579th in the entire world. Once he was drafted to play in the NBA, however, he focused solely on basketball, where he had a respectable career, playing for the Houston Rockets and several other teams. Scott Burrell, he played baseball. The Seattle Mariners drafted Burrell as their first-round pick right out of high school with the hopes of developing him into a pitcher, but he stuck with basketball. He had a great college career at UConn, then a long NBA career that was admittedly a little bit less than spectacular. Despite that, he's the only athlete in history to have been drafted in the first round by 2 of the 4 major American sports leagues. Dave DeBusschere, he played basketball. The Knicks Hall of Famer played 2 short seasons as a pitcher for the Chicago White Sox. He pitched a shutout once and ended up with a career ERA of 2.9. Eventually though, he had to make a call between the 2 sports, and basketball thankfully ended up the big winner. And as mentioned before, he became a Hall of Famer, so he chose the right sport. John Havlicek, he played football. In 1962, the Boston Celtics and Cleveland Browns both drafted Havlicek, but after flirting with the football side of things as a wideout in the Browns camp, he decided to focus on basketball, for which he eventually ended up in the Hall of Fame and won numerous championships with the Boston Celtics dynasty. Pat Riley, he played football. Most people know Pat Riley for being the coach of the New York Knicks and Los Angeles Lakers and eventually the GM of the Miami Heat, but he was a superb athlete. While Riley was a first-round pick of the San Diego Rockets back in 1967, he was also an 11th round pick by the Dallas Cowboys that same year, though he obviously made the right decision by sticking with the sport he ultimately chose and has had a Hall of Fame career ever since. Danny Ainge, baseball. In today's sports world, a story like this would be a huge deal, but for a few years in the late 70s and early 80s, Ainge actually played college basketball at BYU and partial seasons for the Toronto Blue Jays. He hit a .22 in his pro baseball career, but after a huge March Madness in 1981, he was drafted by the Boston Celtics, who bought out his contract with the Jays so he could play pro hoops. His career as a basketball player is well documented, including the 2 rings that he won in the mid-80s. LeBron James, he of course played football. James was an all-state wide receiver at St. Vincent St. Mary's his sophomore and junior years of high school, and had he not quit football to focus solely on hoops his senior year, he definitely would have continued the trend, and likely would have went on to play college football. Ohio State and Notre Dame recruited him to play for their football teams, but everyone knew he wouldn't pass up an opportunity to play in the NBA. Still, there were scouts who truly believed he was an NFL talent. Despite that, and considering the fact that he's the most physically gifted basketball player alive, we can probably agree that he made the right decision. But who knows how great he would have been if he played in the NFL. Michael Jordan, he played baseball. His airness gets a lot of flack for dabbling in pro baseball in the mid-90s, But the fact is, he saw a reasonable level of success playing AA baseball, despite not having played competitively since high school. He was in his 30s when he jumped sports, which makes the switch even more impressive. While the numbers weren't great, in 127 games, he had a batting average of .202 and 51 RBIs. The attempt was credible, and they went a long way in proving Jordan's prowess as an all-around athlete. Charlie Ward, he played football and baseball. It rarely happens, but after winning the 1993 Heisman Trophy as a quarterback at Florida State, Ward was not drafted by any NFL team. After having made it clear he would not play in the NFL if he wasn't selected in the first round, teams passed on him as a liability later in the '94 draft. He was, however, drafted by the New York Knicks in the second round of the NBA draft that same year. So hoops is the way he went. His career, spent mostly in New York, was a relatively productive one, but his abilities in football and baseball, where he was drafted by the Milwaukee Brewers in 1993, make him one of the better all-around athletes ever. Wilt Chamberlain, he did track and volleyball. Chamberlain's scholarship to the University of Kansas wasn't just for basketball, it was for track and field as well. He set Pennsylvania high school records for the shot put and 100-meter hurdles, and he also won 3 straight Big 8 high jump titles. After his basketball career was done, he played 5 years for the Seattle Smashers of the International Volleyball Association, where he dominated just as well as he did in basketball. Allen Iverson, he played football, and his story is crazy. Allen Iverson is remembered for many things during his legendary career in the NBA, for better or for worse. Many recall his fearlessness on the court as one of the league's most dangerous dribblers and scorers. His passing abilities should also not be forgotten. He averaged 8 assists a night while he was leading the league in scoring during 2005. On the other hand, there's the answer's infamous side. From the arrogance to missing team practices, there's also the rumor that the NBA's rule on player fashion came about largely because of him. But for those familiar with his younger days in high school, he was once one of the top football prospects in the entire nation. At face value, the jobs of a point guard and quarterback can be very similar. They are often the field generals during game time, getting people to the right spots before delivering the ball to where it needs to go. In the history of the NFL, there are several players that hooped in college, like Terrell Owens and Tony Gonzalez. Comparing those athletes to AI is a terrible comparison though. For Allen Iverson, football was not just another sport, it was his true passion, and he just so happened to be one of the nation's top talents. In a different universe, he might have found his way into the Hall of Fame as a football player. Iverson was a highly recruited quarterback by the time he was done with high school, though he made his name because he could play almost anywhere. When he was in 8th grade, he played for Bethel High School's junior varsity team. When he finally made it to high school, he started as both a wide receiver and safety for varsity. By the time he was a sophomore, he took over the starting quarterback spot. With his speed and all the weapons at his disposal, many believed him to be the top talent in the nation, over other rising stars like Michael Vick. There was no question that Iverson had the most talent and the most speed, and the Florida Seminoles were ready to offer him a scholarship to play both football and basketball. Unfortunately, that was a future that would never come to pass. And with that being said, that wraps up today's video, going over NBA players who played multiple sports. Comment down below which one surprised you the most, and remember to drop a like and subscribe to Triple Double for more videos.